The phone rang exactly 3 times. Not a buzzing text, not a soft chime, but the jarring rotary-era brrr ring of a secure line. It was 2 a.m., the kind of hour where secrets are born and empires crumble. Jimmy, my source, the guy who spent 20 years carrying water bottles for 3 different presidents before finding peace in podcasting, answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep and adrenaline. "It's done," he whispered. Just 2 words. I sat straight up in bed, the cheap motel room air conditioning rattling like a loose screw. "Done how, Jimmy?" I asked, my own voice a low, focused rumble. "Did the judge sign the papers? Did the senator confess?" "No. Worse. Better. It depends on who you ask." Jimmy paused. I could hear him lighting a cigarette, the familiar, raspy exhale. It was Sly, at Gold's, 10 hours ago. I blinked. Sylvester Stallone, the icon, the man whose face was etched into the Mount Rushmore of American grit. What the hell was he doing involved in something that needed a secure line at 2 in the morning? "Start from the beginning, Jimmy. Don't summarize. Tell me the color of the paint on the walls." Jimmy took a long drag. It wasn't politics this time. It wasn't a studio feud or a bad contract negotiation. It was just a moment. A tiny, stupid moment of cruelty, played out under fluorescent lights in Venice, California. And it ended up defining everything. He told me about the smell, the overpowering metallic scent of iron mixed with stale sweat and the lingering perfume of ambition. He described the silence, that absolute, devastating silence that only happens when every single person in a room full of noise suddenly realizes they are witnessing history. A powerful man had done something small, a monstrous man had tried to do something big, and the entire thing hinged on a bench press, a cocky idiot, and a kid who just wanted to lift. But to understand why the silence was so loud, we needed to know who was in the room that day. We needed to pull back the curtain on the exhaustion, the expectations, and the pure, unadulterated tension that had been building in that corner of the world for decades. We have to rewind 6 months. Forget the gym for a minute. The world outside was a coiled spring. The early 2000s were brutal. Everyone felt the pressure of image, the need to be bigger, faster, and infinitely tougher. Masculinity was being redefined by the second, in magazine covers, in financial markets, in the relentless grind of celebrity. And nowhere was this tension more distilled than at Gold's Gym in Venice, California. This wasn't a recreational center. It was a cathedral of narcissism and hard work. You didn't train here, you fought here. The kid, Ethan Reyes. Ethan Reyes was 17, scrawny, maybe 145 pounds soaking wet. He drove a beat-up Civic and worked 3 shifts a week shelving books just to afford the Gold's membership. He didn't lift for girls or for glory. He lifted because when he was moving that iron, the world outside, his mother's medical bills, the impossible grades, the constant low-level anxiety, it all faded away. The rhythm was his therapy. Ethan was respectful. Too respectful, maybe. He always wiped down the machines twice. He never dared make eye contact with the giants who roamed the floor, the men who looked like they were carved from granite, their veins like irrigation maps. He wore baggy, faded t-shirts. His shoes were old Nikes with worn-out tread. He was invisible, and that was exactly how he liked it. He knew his place, he knew the hierarchy. Yuri Solsur, the bully. Mac, the monolith Garrison. Mac Garrison had been lifting since he was 14, and he carried that history on his shoulders. Not just muscle, but entitlement. Mac was 32, a walking sculpture of rage and performance-enhancing drugs. He had thick neck tendons and eyes that perpetually looked like he was smelling something bad. Mac was a professional bodybuilder, meaning he was constantly hungry, constantly dehydrated, and constantly furious that he wasn't yet famous. He needed an audience, he needed subservience. His Instagram handle was literally the monolith, and he acted like it. He claimed the bench press like a king claims a throne. For Mac, the gym wasn't about health, it was about power projection. He hated waste. He hated weakness. And most of all, he hated teenagers taking up his space. There was history between them, subtle but sharp. 2 weeks prior, Mac had bumped Ethan's shoulder on the way to the water fountain, and Ethan, without thinking, had mumbled, "Excuse me, sir." Mac stopped, turned slowly, and stared at Ethan until the kid's face went crimson and he scurried away. It was a small interaction, but it planted a seed of humiliation in Ethan and a flicker of disdain in Mac. The icon, Sylvester Stallone. Stallone was different. He was the root system of the place. He'd trained at Gold's when it was nothing but dusty iron and ambition. He was 55 now, still relentless, still pushing limits, but carrying the weight of 4 decades in the spotlight. That particular week, Sly was tired. Hollywood was grinding him down. Another script rewrite? Another endless meeting where executives half his age explained how to appeal to the youth demographic. He felt like an artifact. A beautiful, dangerous, aging machine that everyone admired, but nobody quite knew where to display anymore. He came to the gym not for the show, but for the therapy. He came to feel the iron, the honest weight that never lied, never judged, and never asked for notes on the third act. He wanted anonymity, a rare commodity for a man of his stature. That day, he walked into Gold's not as Rocky, but as Sylvester, a tired man in a worn gray sweatsuit, needing solitude. It was Tuesday, 4:45 p.m. The gym was peaking. The music, heavy, unrelenting metal, pulsed through the air, mixing with the clang of dropped plates. Ethan arrived first. He was nervous. His car wouldn't start this morning, throwing his schedule off, and he felt rushed. He had a tight window before his late shift. He spotted the bench press, the main one, the power bench in the center of the floor. It was open, a miracle. He hurried over, setting his water bottle and worn notebook on the floor. He loaded the bar cautiously, using 15-pound plates on each side. He was going for a personal best, 3 sets of 12 reps at 185 pounds. A modest goal, but his goal. He lay back, gripped the cold steel, and took a deep breath. Focus. He completed his first set. The weight felt heavy, necessary. Across the room, near the dumbbell rack, Mac Garrison was finishing a set of bicep curls. So heavy he had to grunt out the final reps, his face distorting into a mask of theatrical pain. He scanned the room, looking for validation. He spotted Ethan on the bench. Mac scoffed. 185? A warm-up weight. He began stalking the perimeter, working his way slowly toward the bench, toweling off with dramatic intensity. Every step was deliberate. He was a shark circling prey he already knew was weak. The arrival. Then, the mood shifted. Not because of Mac, but because of the man who walked in through the main doors. Stallone. He didn't make an entrance. He simply arrived. He walked with that distinctive, slightly bowed gait, his head down, shoulders heavy. He wore mirrored aviators, cutting off any chance of eye contact. He didn't bother with the main area. He headed straight back to the quiet corner, the old dusty cable machines where true isolation could be found. He tossed his gym bag down. He didn't acknowledge the 2 guys who instantly stopped their conversation to stare. He started stretching, slow, deliberate movements of a man who knew exactly where all his past injuries lived. The atmosphere tightened. Now, 2 forces were dominating the floor, the obvious, threatening power of Mac, and the quiet, monumental presence of Stallone. Mac saw Stallone arrive. This energized him. He needed to prove he belonged in the same building as the legend. He needed a conquest, a small, visible victory to validate his own monstrous scale. He took his final steps towards the bench press. Ethan was starting his second set. He had just unracked the bar. Ethan was halfway through the set. His muscles were burning. He pushed upward. The bar hesitated, then rocketed back toward the ceiling. He was deep in the struggle, his face red, focused only on the metal above his eyes. Max stood directly over him, a shadow. "How long you got on this?" Mac's voice cut through the metal music. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. Ethan lowered the bar carefully, fighting the instinct to dump it. He re-racked the weight, breathing hard. He sat up, startled. "Oh, hi. One more set? Maybe 5 minutes?" "Sorry." Ethan grabbed his towel, ready to apologize further. Mac didn't move. He stood there, arms crossed, the veins in his biceps throbbing under his skin. He smelled of cheap, aggressive cologne and testosterone. 5 minutes? Mac sneered, making the number sound obscene. "You think this is a squat rack at Planet Fitness, kid? This is the power bench." Ethan felt his stomach drop. His palms were already sweating, not from the lifting, but from the confrontation. "I know, sir. I'm just trying to finish up. I'll move fast." "You're moving now," Mac stated flatly. "I got 3 plates and a spotter waiting. We don't wait for kids wasting time with broomsticks. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, but the threat was amplified by the quiet intensity of his posture. Look around, buddy. We got people here actually working. Guys who pay rent with this iron. You gotta learn the flow. The flow doesn't stop for 185 pounds. He kicked Ethan's small water bottle, sending it skittering under the bench. It was pure, casual humiliation, designed to minimize, to erase. Ethan scrambled off the bench. He didn't argue. He didn't even look Mac in the eye. He just reached for his plates, his hands shaking slightly. Okay, sorry, I'll just finish my last set somewhere else. Mac let out a loud, mocking laugh. Damn right you will. He immediately started stripping Ethan's 15-pound plates off the bar with aggressive contempt, tossing them onto the floor with a loud, ringing crash. Ethan felt the shame burn through his chest. He was trying to grab his notebook when Mac, frustrated with the speed of his departure, pushed past him, grabbing a 45-pound plate. The impact was enough to shove Ethan hard against a nearby pillar. Ethan stumbled, catching himself. He didn't fall, but the public slight was complete. He was dismissed, irrelevant, physically thrown aside. He picked up his notebook and began walking away, head bowed, eyes fixed on the dirty floor. He just wanted to disappear. During the shift, that's when the sound of heavy metal music seemed to vanish completely. It wasn't a sudden cutoff. It was more like the sound engineer suddenly realized the track was too loud and slowly faded it out. The clanging plates, the grunts, the chatter, all gone. Every single person in the massive gym, from the squat rack to the smoothie bar, went absolutely, profoundly still. Stallone had stopped stretching. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't even moved quickly. He was just standing there, 50 feet away near the heavy cable machine. His arms relaxed at his sides. But he was watching. The mirrored aviators were gone. His eyes, the heavy hooded eyes that had seen wars and championships, were locked onto Mac. Mac, mid-flex, suddenly felt the air pressure change. He stopped loading his third plate. He felt the 100 eyes on him, but they weren't admiring him. They were watching the man behind him. Mac straightened up, forcing a cocky grin. He tried to ignore the silence. He tried to resume loading the bar. His hands were clumsy now. Stallone started walking. He didn't stride. He moved like a very heavy boat moving through calm water. Slow, unstoppable, silent. Every step was a beat in the profound silence. The only sound was the faint squeak of his worn Nikes on the rubber floor. He walked past the huge squat racks, past the water cooler, straight toward Mac and the displaced teenager. Ethan froze mid-step. He recognized the heavy, slow-moving presence. He instinctively pulled himself tight against the wall, trying to make himself smaller. Stallone stopped directly between Mac and the bench press. He didn't look at Mac yet. He looked at Ethan. He looked at the boy's burning face, his shame, the tremor in his hands gripping the battered notebook. Hey, kid. Stallone's voice was low. Not booming, but rough, seasoned, and carrying the absolute authority of decades. Ethan looked up, terrified. Mr. Stallone? Stallone didn't acknowledge the title. That's your notebook? Ethan nodded, gripping it tighter. You got your workout written down? Yes, sir. Just my third set. Stallone nodded once. He looked at the bar. Mac was half done loading. Mac had put on 3 45s, a heavy weight that suddenly looked pointless. Stallone finally turned his full attention to Mac. Mac was trying to stand tall, trying to look unimpressed, but his shoulders were tensing, and his forced grin had withered into a thin line of pure fear. Mac had bullied a kid. Now, he was facing an archetype. I heard you say something about wasting time, Stallone said, his voice flat. Look, Sly, with all respect, this is the power bench. We got a routine here. This kid was tying it up with, featherweight stuff. Mac tried to sound authoritative. The veteran. Stallone tilted his head. Featherweight? Yeah, 185 pounds. It's barely moving the needle. Stallone took a deep breath. The smell of moguls and movie sets had been replaced by the honest stench of sweat and dust. 185 pounds, Stallone repeated slowly. For a 17-year-old kid who looks like he's trying to put himself through college and works too many hours to eat properly. He looked down the bar at the 3 45s Mac had loaded. He reached out a hand and slowly, deliberately, stripped one of the 45s off the bar and set it down quietly. Then another, and another. He pulled the 45s that had belonged to Mac's spotter, who had wisely vanished the moment Stallone moved. until only the empty bar remained. He reached down and picked up one of Ethan's 15-pound plates, the ones Mac had contemptuously tossed away. He put it on the bar, then another. The only sound in the gym was the thunk of the metal being handled properly. Stallone looked at Ethan. "Kid, come here." Ethan shuffled forward, bewildered. "Get on the bench," Sly commanded, pointing at the cold vinyl. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then obeyed, lying down exactly where Mac had just been standing. Stallone adjusted the bar perfectly over Ethan's chest. "Now, I want you to finish that third set," Stallone said, "and I want you to make every rep count. You think about that job. You think about that algebra class. You think about every single thing that makes you tired, and you lift that weight like it's the answer to all of it." Ethan nodded, gripping the bar. "You tell me when you get tired, kid. I'm spotting you." Stallone positioned himself behind the bench. He wasn't touching the bar, but his presence, his enormous quiet competence, was the spot itself. Ethan took the weight off the rack. He started his reps. 1, 2, 3. He lifted with a new ferocity. He wasn't lifting 185 pounds. He was lifting the weight of the moment. Mac stood there, paralyzed. He was a statue of aggressive failure. Every muscle in his massive body was screaming for him to flee or fight, but the stillness of the room, the absolute focus of the legendary man ignoring him, held him in place. Ethan hit 12 reps. His muscles were shaking violently. "Good," Stallone murmured. "You got 2 more in you. Push." Ethan grit his teeth, forcing 13, then 14. He lowered the bar. He had shattered his expected maximum. "Racket," Stallone said softly. The clank of the bar hitting the rack echoed through the dead silence. Ethan sat up, trembling, exhausted, and strangely euphoric. He looked at Stallone, his eyes wide with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Stallone." Stallone finally put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. A massive, reassuring weight. "You're strong, kid. That's real strength. Don't ever let a clown tell you otherwise." Then Stallone looked back at Mac, who was still frozen. Stallone didn't shout. He didn't even raise his voice above the low conversational tone. "You want the bench?" Stallone asked Mac. Mac swallowed hard. No, not right now. I gotta hit the cables." "No," Stallone corrected him. "You don't. You need to pick up the plates you threw on the floor, all of them, and wipe down the bench press. Then you need to go home, Mac." Mac's jaw flexed. The humiliation was total. He was being ordered around by the man he idolized, in front of the audience he craved. He looked around. Not a single person was sympathetic. The entire gym, silent and staring, was on Stallone's side. Mac bent down, his massive frame looking clumsy as he picked up the small plates he had discarded. He wiped the bench with a towel he pulled from his gym bag. He didn't look at Ethan. He didn't look at Stallone. He just gathered his things and walked toward the exit, his enormous shoulders suddenly looking small and defeated. He disappeared into the parking lot. Stallone turned back to Ethan. "Now," he said, pulling a $20 bill from his pocket. "Go get yourself a good steak, you earned it, and come back tomorrow, you keep working." He gave Ethan a look that was both weary and profound. Then he turned and walked back to his quiet corner. He put his aviators back on, grabbed the handles of the cable machine and started working, just as the heavy metal music, as if on cue, roared back to life. The entire incident had taken 4 minutes, but the silence had lasted a lifetime. It took exactly 38 minutes for the story to leak. The gym was full of people taking selfies and secretly recording workouts. Someone had been filming their own shoulder press and caught the entirety of Stallone's walk and the ensuing silence in the background. Someone else, a personal trainer named Leo, who was friends with Jimmy, my source, had seen the whole thing play out feet away. Leo was the one who called Jimmy. "Jimmy, you won't believe what I just saw. It was like a movie, but real. It was old school justice, man." The social media tsunami. By morning, the footage, grainy and distant, was everywhere. It was initially uploaded to a fitness forum under the title, "Sly Puts Bro in His Place," but the title quickly morphed into the catchy viral headline that launched 1,000 shares. The reaction was immediate, visceral, and overwhelming. Twitter trends: 8 a.m. PST. 1 Stalin Justice. 2 Monolith Mac, trending alongside crying emojis. 3 Bench Press, Hero. Sample tweets. Real Roxy read, "Watching Stallone handle that bully just proves real power whispers." That 4 minutes of silence was louder than every word in Hollywood this year. Stalin Justice. Gym rat. Life. Monolith. Mac got absolutely crushed, not by weight but by moral authority. He got sent home with his tail between his legs. This is the definition of a humbling L. Ethan Reyes fan. I don't know who this kid Ethan is, but good on him. And thank you, Stallone, for defending the little guy. We needed this. The collapse of Mac. Mac Garrison's life imploded instantly. He woke up to 45,000 notifications. His Instagram comments were a war zone. People were finding his personal Facebook and sending him photos of Rocky Balboa pointing accusingly. His main sponsor, a large protein supplement company that thrived on alpha branding, called his agent at 9 a.m. The publicist's phone call, transcribed by Jimmy. Ring, ring, click. Agent, Brenda. Mac, look, I saw the video. It's grainy, but the narrative is clear. You kicked a kid off a bench press and Sly Stallone had to intervene. Mac, furious, defensive. I didn't kick him. I told him to move. He was wasting the bench. It's the culture, Brenda. Stallone is old school. He should know that. Brenda. No, Mac, the culture just changed. Stallone is the culture. You insulted him by proxy, and he made you pick up the weights like a toddler. Look, I just got off the phone with Flex Fuel. They are terminating your contract effective immediately. Mac. What? But I'm their cover model for next month. Brenda. They said they're using the issue as toilet paper. You are toxic, Mac. You bullied a minor in front of a living legend who then publicly humiliated you. You are the anti-hero nobody wants. Stay offline. Do not reply to anything. I'll call you back when the internet finds a new villain. The quiet grace of Ethan, meanwhile, was completely oblivious. He was shelving books at the bookstore, convinced the incident was a contained gym embarrassment. He didn't check his phone until lunch. When he did, he didn't understand why his phone was overheating. Hundreds of DMs, people thanking him, people calling him a symbol. He finally clicked the video link someone sent him. He watched the blurry footage of the massive Mac crumbling under the weight of Stallone's silent rebuke. He watched himself lift the final shaky reps under the gaze of a man he'd only ever seen on movie posters. He went back to work, his heart pounding. The $20 Stallone had given him was folded neatly in his wallet. He realized this wasn't just a gym story. This was something real. Analyzing the fallout. Months later. 6 months later, the story still had legs. Mac Garrison essentially disappeared. He tried to pivot to candid honesty videos, but the internet didn't forget. He became a punchline, a symbol of entitled toxicity. He moved gyms, changed his Instagram name, and faded into the depressing obscurity of forgotten influencers. Ethan Reyes, however, received unexpected support. The local news ran a feel-good piece. A few weeks later, Ethan got a completely anonymous, generous scholarship to a local university. He suspected it was Stallone, but the source was untraceable. Ethan didn't leverage the fame. He kept training. He kept working. He learned the difference between aggression and actual internal strength. The gym itself became iconic for the moment. People would point to the exact spot where Stallone stood and where Mac had been broken. It became known simply as the silent bench. This incident, which seemed so small, had perfectly captured the public mood. People were tired of loud, aggressive entitlement. They were starved for quiet, powerful decency. They weren't looking for a hero to shoot the bad guy. They were looking for a mentor to teach the good guy how to lift. You see, Mac had a fundamental misunderstanding of power. He thought it was about volume, about size, about intimidation. He was living the script of a bad action movie villain. All roar, no soul. But Stallone, the man who had written the book on cinematic power, knew better. True strength isn't about how much you can lift when the spotlight is on you. It's about recognizing the effort of the person next to you. It's about knowing the price of 185 pounds when you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Stallone didn't need to yell. He didn't need to fight. He just needed to be who he was, a silent, immovable force of integrity, and focus that immense gravity onto the vulnerable kid. The message was simple, carved into the iron of that gym floor. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You just need to be right. And when you stand up for the quiet ones, when you defend the effort, the world notices. That's why the silence was so deafening. It was the sound of decency winning for once. The sound of an old-school hero reminding everyone what the word heavy really means. It means responsibility. It means compassion. The world needs more people like this. Share if you agree.